Hey there, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to experiment with some 1084 and some wrought iron. This wrought iron is from an old wagon wheel tire that I purchased some time ago. I don't plan on using this entire piece of wrought iron, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it down to about 2 inches, probably 2.5. Notice the sparking that's coming off of this piece of wrought iron? That will come back to bite me later. He shoots, he scores! One of the first things we need to do is change out these dies on the press. Now that the forge has come up to temperature, we can go ahead and put in our wrought iron. It's gotta soak a bit. This first pass on the press will be to increase the thickness of the wrought iron before we put the 1084 insert. Now that we've got our desired thickness, we'll set the tangs and be putting one on each end of the wrought iron body. This will allow us to hold the billet from either end as we begin the forging process. Now that we have two tangs, we'll start cutting the space where the 1084 will be inserted. I used a railroad spike to do this, and it worked way better than I was expecting. Before we put the 1084 in, I dip it in kerosene to help the forge welding that we'll be doing here soon. All I'm doing here is closing up those gaps between the wrought iron and the 1084. Off camera, I put the whole thing back in the forge to bring it up to forge welding temperatures. After a quick cleaning with the block brush, I give the welds some light taps to set them. After the first few taps to set the welds, I'll start more aggressively hammering on the billet. A second cleanup with the block brush, and back into the forge it goes. As I was forging, I noticed a small pocket where the weld didn't take, so I attempted to drill it out. I also thought it would look more interesting if there was a raindrop effect, so I drilled a few more shallow holes. Spoiler, it didn't work like I was hoping. So here all I'm doing is trying to figure out where the halfway point is so we can cut this billet in half and then have two knives. Like before, I use a railroad spike as a hot chisel to cut the two pieces in half. Now we can work on each knife independently. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start by drawing them out to approximately how long we want, using both the hydraulic press and eventually the rolling mill. Now that they're closer to the length we're looking for, we can start hammering them into something that looks more like a knife. After we have it to shape, we're going to go ahead and thermal cycle it a couple of times. What thermal cycling will do is soften that steel up just a little bit to make it easier to work before we do a heat treat. On this blade I'm trying to make an integral bolster, and this part of it's just me straightening it out, making sure that it's centered and flush and all that. I was really happy with the shape how this one came out, but it doesn't work out in the end. You'll see here soon. So this was the first one. It's more like a kind of a kitchen knife looking thing, and I wanted to get a quick test etch to see how it would end up looking. I'm glad that I actually did this because I found out here, as you can see, that the 1084 doesn't quite go the entire length. You can see it right here in the top, or the heel of the blade. As a result, we had to rethink the shape of the blade. So I used these French curves, and we just cut out that particular area and then redefine what the blade was actually going to look like in the end. Then after that was set, we just ground away the wrought iron that wasn't going to be on the cutting edge. Here all we're doing is with some files, just defining the shoulders, using a carbide file guide and just some different types of files to actually get a more definitive look on that. Now it's time for the heat treat. If you notice real quick, I paused just before I put it in the oil. That blade was way too hot for quenching. And here's the other one, that kind of recurve bowie. Again, I really liked the way this looked when I hammered it out, but yeah, there was too much wrought iron in the blade. Again, you'll see here in a minute. After quenching, I put it between these two pieces of angle iron just to help keep it straight while it cooled down some more. In the background there you see me working on that original kitchen knife, I suppose, and those sparks are coming from the 1084 insert. So this is that recurve bowie. Pay attention to those sparks. Did you catch that right at the end where all the sparks kind of disappear? Watch. Sparks? No sparks. Sparks? Damn. What that ultimately means is that I got some wrought iron in the tip on the cutting edge and it's gotta go. And no, bladesmiths don't make mistakes. We just make shorter blades. And so as you can see, it did not come out how I originally planned. Oh well. So here's a little interesting thing. It's a little hard to tell, but in this shot you can see that the blade is not exactly straight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this ball peen hammer that has a tungsten carbide bearing, I guess, in the very end of it, and we're just going to give it light little taps, and that, believe it or not, is going to straighten this out. What's happening here is that tungsten bearing is moving the steel just ever so slightly, and the more taps you have, the more it moves in the direction that you're tapping. And just like that, it's straight. At this point, all we're trying to do now is finalize our bevels. I didn't mark this, so I've been trying to keep it center. And when everything was completed, it actually came out pretty true. This is something that I've only recently started doing. What you see on the belt grinder there is a Scotch-Brite belt. And I'm just trying to get those high spots cleared off. And what that does in the end is help us speed up the amount of time it takes to polish. So all I'm doing here is cleaning the blade off with some acetone and some brake cleaner to give as much of the oils off as I can before I put it in the acid, which is that yellow Kool-Aid looking thing right there. I only let this sit for a couple of minutes. I just kind of wanted to get an idea what it was going to look like because I haven't really done the polishing. And, well, here it is. Well, this wraps it up for the first video in what will probably be a 2 or 3 video series. In the next video, we're either going to see if we can salvage that recurve bowie, or we're going to finish this one up. In any case, thanks for sticking around to the end. If you caught my spelling error at the beginning of the video, leave me a comment starting with the correct spelling of that word. Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next one.